Hi, my name is Shereen.
I'm Sidney.
And I'm Kiersten.
And we're TESOL students from York University who completed our practicum at the University of Toronto's International Foundations program. And we observed a course called Academic Literacies and Identities.
And basically, the course was an English for Academic Purposes course. It was designed to, over the course of a year, prepare students for entrance into the University of Toronto. It was for students who just fell below the minimum requirements on their English exams, and so if they pass this program, they get into the university.
Yep, so we all observed the same section of the course, but I know you two were in the same class.
That's right.
So what were the students like for you guys?
In our class, the majority of the students were from mainland China, so mainly spoke Mandarin, and there were one or two students who didn't speak Mandarin. Yeah. What about in your class?
It was pretty much the same for me there too.
Right, so the general idea we want to talk about here is teaching in this context where all of your students come from, for the most part, the same linguistic and cultural background, and how to fit in the one or two students that don't come from that background, how to fit them into the picture as well.
So I know for my class, my professor was very lenient on students using their L1, whether that was through discussion or like talking to their peers. So it kind of created this comforting environment for them, stress-free.
Yeah, and it was pretty much the same in our class. The students were allowed to speak their L1, and it was the same. It created a comfortable environment for them. And this goes along with what current research says, that allowing students to speak their L1 is beneficial for them.
It also could be related to its affective humanistic theory. It kind of puts the students at the center of the classroom, putting like an emphasis on their emotional well-being. So I think that's a nice like tie-in together there.
Mm-hmm. So we noticed an example of this in our class. I saw one of the students having a conversation with the teacher at the end of the class about his midterm mark, and he didn't do as well as he expected. And this was because he was answering the questions just as quickly as he could, as efficiently as he could, instead of going into depth and giving critical analysis for his answers. Yeah. And this is because this is a cultural difference in China. That's what's expected of them there, and the teacher didn't know this. So she was telling him that she'll try to be more accommodating to this cultural difference. And this is important for us as teachers to understand your students' culture so that you can accommodate for these kinds of differences.
Yeah, it's really important to sort of try to put yourself in their shoes or be open-minded and not so quick to judge based on your own culture. Like, for example, I noticed I was sitting in the back of the class with the students. Nobody was looking at the teacher. Everybody was looking down at like a laptop, or there was no paper notes, it was just laptops. But I wanted to feel offended for her, and I was like, how can she just keep teaching with a smile on her face, right? But later I remember reading that students or people in general in some cultures don't make eye contact with a speaker unless they have a question. And I actually remembered the teacher asking one of these students who had their head down the whole time question during a lesson, and she had the exact comprehensive answer, and she was actually paying attention the whole time. And so you can't just judge the students based on your own culture, and you got to think more generally too. How are they feeling? What are they thinking? You got to put yourself in their shoes. I think that's what AHA is pretty much all about, if I understand correctly.
Yep. And it's a really good thing to consider, having that, that comfort in the classroom. But I think it's also important to note that, while putting their emotions first is really important, sometimes English skills can suffer when they aren't pushed out of their comfort zone enough. So I noticed in my own observation experience that groups that spoke Mandarin during prep time or when they were asking each other questions, their English presentation skills actually suffered because they weren't, practicing that verbal output enough.
Right.
So if the classroom's almost too comfortable, then their L2 will suffer.
Right. We actually noticed in our classes, I asked the teacher about how to include these students who don't speak Mandarin, and she said she'll rotate them between groups because that way the students in their groups will speak English. They'll be forced to speak English because they can't just speak Mandarin like the other groups. And we didn't really notice any groups suffering that badly with their presentation skills. All of them were able to put together something coherent in front of the class, and I think that might be a key difference why is that she was rotating these non-Mandarin speakers basically between all the groups, and therefore everybody at some point had to speak English to include that group member.
Right, yeah, so overall group making is really important and something we should keep in mind as future teachers. And in general, we observed a lot of different skills from these teachers that we should keep in mind in the future. For example, L1 use, cultural differences in your students and how you can take that into consideration, and group making. So overall, it was very successful. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much, guys.